Hey, this is Ezra from newschoolbeer.com. This is the second edition of our new Fireside Chats video series. Today we have Nick Arzner, co-founder of Block 15. You established Block 15 in 2008, is that right?
Yep, we started 2008, my wife and I, just as a small brew pub downtown Corvallis. So, yeah, been rocking it 12 years, I guess, there.
Does it feel like it's been that long?
Sometimes, I think recently it feels a lot longer, but we started, we were pretty young. I was 29 and she was 26. So even though we've been around 12 years, we're still fairly young, I'd like to think. So sometimes it kind of feels when we reflect, and we're always doing, always kind of we organically grow, whether it's our breweries or tap rooms or distribution or whatever. So it's kind of feels like we're always doing something new, which keeps it kind of fresh and young.
Yeah, that's one of the things I kind of thought about now, is that when I first kind of met you and came to Block 15, and I don't know, probably around 2011 or something like that, you always described it, and it was primarily like a brew pub, like a local establishment, right?
Yeah, and it still is down in the heart of Corvallis. Obviously before the circumstances we're under now, but still like a really nice community hub. It was kind of nice when we opened Block 15 as a pub. That was or as a brew pub. That was what we wanted, was this community-centered place. And quite honestly, I was in tune with going to a lot of different breweries or brew pubs at the time, but not into the real in-depth brewing or kind of community that's out there that kind of developed naturally over time.
And what was your experience in the industry before you opened Block 15?
Yeah, we both my wife and I had worked in a lot of restaurants, so that's when we opened. We hired a brewmaster, Steve Van Rossen, who's still brewing at Planktown now, but I knew even as a home brewer, so we homebrewed a lot. Had been to a lot of breweries and brew pubs around the nation, and so kind of had this vision of what we wanted to do. So our experience was in restaurants. I've started off as a busboy, years and years ago, and then I've done everything in the restaurant industry from being a busboy to being a dishwasher to being a server, a bartender, a line cook, a manager. And so that was really where my experience was, running restaurants. The passion was brewing and brew pubs. And so we brought on Steve Van Rossen to kind of kick off our brewing program while we kind of got the restaurant going.
And initially, the way I remember it is you had a lot of classic beer styles where you kind of you had like the bases covered. You had a dark beer, and you had a pale ale, and you had a fruit beer and stuff. Is that accurate?
Yeah, the big difference for us in 2008, if you can remember way back then, was that, and we realized this when we were going to different breweries, different brew pubs, and whether it was in Indiana or whether it was in Oregon, we met in Indiana, that's where we went to college, was that it kind of became really, you knew what a brewery was going to have on tap. It was going to be a light beer, a lager if you're lucky, generally a blonde, a pale ale, an IPA, significantly different than the IPAs today, a dark beer, so that'd be a stout or a porter, a red or an amber, and then maybe one or two seasonals, generally made with the same yeast strain as everything else. So one thing we had an aha moment at some point, actually, was a brewery in outside of Detroit, Michigan. It was called Dragon Meat. I believe they're still there. And we go into this place, and they had 50 of their own beers on tap. And both my wife and I are like, holy shit, this is crazy to have 50. And so I was peered back in their brewery, and a guy comes up behind me and says, hey, you want to take a look? He ended up being the owner. I can't recall his name. And we went back in this brewery, and they had this crazy system. It was like, I'm going to get this a little bit wrong, but it was something like, it was a 3.5 barrel system with like a couple kettles or a few kettles and all these fermenters everywhere. And it was at that point we really realized the pipe dream of owning a brew pub, which is several years earlier, we would have variety on our tap list, not like 50 beers, because that's insane. but a lot more than if you go to brew pub A in one town. You kind of know what to expect. They're all brewed a little bit differently, different quality, but brew pub B, it'd kind of be the same shit, again, a different place. So when we opened, we decided we're going to have our standards, and I call them like Northwest Classics, and we still generally have those. We have our light beer, it's a Pilsner, we have our Pale Ale, our IPA. But then, and even when we opened, we had, I think, 5 or 6 kind of standards. We quickly put on 2 or 3 more, and 2 or 3 more, and then we added more taps. And then we had 20 of our own beers on tap, not brewed with the same yeast strain, brewed with several different yeast strains. If we did a Hefeweizen, we used a Bavarian yeast strain. So that was really unique at the time, and still kind of how we approach our offerings or beerless.
Yeah, I mean, when in 2008, I mean, that was like years before we had the kind of modern craft brewery boom in like 2011-ish, right? So the scene was probably a lot different, for those first few years.
Yeah. And it was great bringing Steve on. So Steve, he had experience. He had worked, I believe he had brewed about 14 years at the time for a couple different McMinimans, had taken a break from brewing, and we got connected through a friend. He came to brew for Block 15, and he was really good at crushing out those standards. So I would release Steve on the standards and work on those. And then it was at those times where when you wanted to get information about beer, craft brewing, you went to books. There wasn't a whole lot of stuff on the internet or all these blogs. They were just kind of starting to pop up, or techniques and everything else. So I went in heavy into books, and some really cool books coming out at the time. Either historical styles of beer or, wild ales were getting some prevalence, and being able to, so we went right into barrel aging beer. I think even in our first year we started working with wild yeast and bacteria, or pretty soon after that, progressive hopping techniques on beer. So we became, once we got the restaurants up and running, I kind of started working with Steve, and I was more doing the research and deciding where we wanted to go and experiment. And we ended up throwing away a lot of beer, but that was kind of part of it back then. But and we're in this little brew pub in Corvallis, and people really didn't expect that. So it was cool to be able to come to this in this village, I think, to come and see that tap list and that diversity of what's going on tap, and always the coming soon, like what's coming soon. And it was a good mix. I love looking at historical style and researching the shit out of it, and then saying, can we nail this style just like this, or what's our best way to do that? And I also love just kind of coming up with the techniques and ideas we have and putting something together, or kind of pushing a genre one way or another.
Mm-hmm. And for a long time there, you could basically only get your beers at the brewery and in Corvallis, right?
Yeah. We wanted to, I always said we wanted to grow quality, not quantity. So even though our pub was has been very popular pretty much ever since it opened. I think we started with, I know you've been there, but for people watching that haven't, we have a little 7-barrel brew house upstairs, and in the basement, or the cellar, which is pretty expansive, we have our cellaring operations. I think we started with like 2 conical fermenters and 3 conditioning tanks, which were converted Grundys. And at some point over like the years, we kept adding tanks, a lot of Grundys. We've got Grundys that we whacked in half, called limousine Grundys, to do double batches into, because we're trying to grow our tank space, but not to produce more beer, but to be able to give our beer more time and work on different projects. And so it was a real big, when we opened Block 15, I thought to myself, if we last 3 months, I'm going to be happy, whatever, you give it a shot. And so at some point, you're a couple of years in, you're going, holy shit, what do we want to do? And there's always the pressure to grow or build in their place. But my wife and I decided, we love what we have going on here. Let's really focus on growing quality and not quantity. And then at some point, so I would, as people were interested in our beer, I'd load up my Toyota Tacoma, with beer about once a month, drive it to Portland, which is great. It's how we got a lot of people to kind of know who we were, and these wonderful beer bars and tap rooms and bottle shops that were interested in our products. We were able to kind of give them a little bit and spread the word about us. So it wasn't until 2014 or 15 that we opened our tap room and 20 barrel brew house breweries. So that was kind of the focus, just like, let's do quality experimentation. And then maybe someday we'll do something bigger. Maybe we won't.
What was the point that you really started to grow and be a little bit more like mainstream, visible, and distribute your beer? Was that with like Sticky Hands?
Yeah, probably. When we opened our 20 barrel brew house and tap room, we went, I knew that we wanted to get into cans right away. Sticky Hands was a program that was developed, I think, in 2012, maybe. The hop market was a freaking wreck back in 2009 or 10. You couldn't get hops, shit like that. So we were really strapped to like what we could do hop wise, and the new hops. We kind of then got ahead of it, got on contract, stuff like that. So all of a sudden we had these hops, different varieties, experimental hops, and I was so excited. And I'm like, we're gonna launch a double IPA, Imperial IPA, because now we can, and we're gonna do it consistently, but we're also gonna experiment at the same time. So Sticky Hands was that beer that we came up with, a double IPA, and we would brew it. We do it at our pub, a double batch once a month, and we would bottle in 750s, not a very limited amount. People would buy those bottles. And then the next month, I think we maybe did it a couple times. Then I realized I wanted to adjust stuff. I thought, well, the best way to adjust this is like, let's actually make variations of this. And that wasn't all that common at that time either. And it became a really cool way for us to experiment on new things, but also for our customers to get excited. So we would do Sticky Hands, the original, and then we do a Sticky Hands variation, and maybe we would do a special, there'd be something we would do to it to give it a theme, like Sticky Hands marmalade. So we use hops that are like really big and orange and marmalade and citrus, and then we'd go back to the regular Sticky Hands, but that would then have what we learned, if anything, from that variation. And we make those tweaks, do it again. Then we do a variation. And so it always evolved this beer. And so that got, that was what then, and hoppy beers were becoming very popular at the same time as well. So we opened the production facility. I think I'm getting back to your question. Our idea is we're still going to self-distribute. I was like, maybe we'll do a couple thousand barrels a year, something like that, maybe 1,000, 2,000 barrels a year. We had our pub that was very successful. We started a tap room here in combination with the production facility that had a lot more business than we anticipated. We had to adjust our menus to account for that. And so we kind of had that luxury of being, I don't need to start a brewery, do 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 barrels. We had the luxury saying, well, we have employees that we love who've been with us. We give them more opportunity. We get our beer out to more people, and we can organically grow. And that's always been the way we've done it, and we kind of continue to do it. So yeah, at that point, we still self-distributed, but to more places and in cans. And bought an actual Sprinter, not my Toyota Tacoma, that was overloaded every time we went somewhere, and kind of put this small team together. And the thought was, let's do this for a year. Self-distribute. If we lose money on it, we can run the numbers. That's fine because we've got revenue coming in other places, but let's just do that. During the time, I met with all the distributors that were interested in us. So I'm like, shit, I'm not going to turn down the meetings. We did the meetings, and there's wonderful distributors out there, really nice people. A lot of shit has changed with those distributors since talking to them it's kind of interesting to see what has happened. But we decided, after a year, we're making a little bit of money distributing. Let's just hang on to it. And so that's how our beer got to more places and kind of where we're at now.
Mm-hmm. And do you have a warehouse or anything in Portland or any of the other markets that you're distributing to now?
No, everything we warehouse here. So we built another building in back 2 years ago. We quickly realized that our cooler in our first production facility wasn't large enough. So we built another building in the back with a big cooler in that. So we, everything we warehouse at our own facility essentially, and then everything we distribute is distributed that day. We go out and back, except for some of our long routes. Our drivers will stay overnight.
Mm-hmm. was it always in the plan to do this, or was this kind of like these, expansions of cans and self-distribution and how far you're going, kind of like something that came up organically as you moved along?
Yeah. So are you referring to how we actually are a wholesaler now? How that we have?
Well, I'm getting to that.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm trying to get to that.
Yeah, like where we're at today has always been, just this organic growth of adding. We in the past, when we added on accounts, we had people that are interested in us. We have a whole onboarding process, which isn't normal for someone to say, "Hey, we want your beer," and we say, "Okay, let's try to set up a time if we have the beer or when we have the beer. A lot of times to talk with you in your account because we're very unique in." Especially, when we were starting to distribute and it was starting to come out that IPAs, you shouldn't throw on a warm shelf for 8 weeks. They change. Maybe you should. Maybe you prefer an IPA on a warm shelf for 8 weeks, but the beer is significantly different. And we were realizing that with years prior with Sticky Hands, especially in our bottles, because our bottles, were hand bottled 750s, those changed really fast, right? And so we realized, so anyways, when we bring on accounts, when we started doing this in 20, I can never keep dates together. So you asked me if it feels like it's been a long time. Shit, I don't even know how long it's been. We really had to educate accounts. Some knew, some of the beer bottle shops have been around a long time. They got it. They understood, like, hey, they were figuring that out too. Well, this like IPA is like, anyways. So we have very specific parameters when you want to carry our beer, depending on the style, how it's kept before it gets to consumer. Because for me as an artisan, and even as we represent a couple other artisans, will represent more in the future, it's important for us to be able, for the consumer, to no matter where you're trying, in our case, our beer, for it to be as I intended, or as our team intended. And if we can't do that, we're really doing a disservice to our product, to the consumer, and even to the retailers. And so that's kind of how we grew. We would then educate accounts. Hey, okay, we have hoppy beers. It's important you keep them cold. Okay, you're gonna keep them on. If you keep it cold, we have this. Here's the clock on it. You've got X amount of time for it to get rid of it, and we inventory, or we'll adjust your inventories. Or okay, you want to put it on, an end cap, fine, but now your time is significantly less for that. So we get through that process. We bring an account on board, and some accounts probably don't want to deal with us, and I quite frankly don't blame them. But consumers know when they're getting our product or any other products that we're handling, that they're going to get to them in the really is damn close, most like 90% of the time, as that artist intended.
Mm-hmm. So is that why you wanted to start Block 15 distribution, which you just announced? And we should update people if they haven't heard that news, that you are actually starting a separate, but involved distribution company that distributes other breweries and even coffee, not just your own beers.
Right. Yeah, I think we got to a point where we realized, and this is now over a year ago, because that's how long it took for us to to get everything switched over, was that we're going to, we've got great relationships with awesome retailers, and we have made it work. And, it's not, generally I think when people think of self-distribution, they think, okay, maybe they have a van and they're getting around, maybe they live in a more metropolis in the Portland area, so they kind of hit a lot of areas. Well, we are self-distributing, as far south as Ashland, to Bellingham, up north to the Oregon coast, out east to Pendleton. Not every week. We have a pattern that we follow, and we were doing it successfully. And we realized that while we're doing that, a lot of these places that we shared kind of how they're going to present our product and our beer, we could give that access to other artisans, or it just makes sense, especially as we're going around in circles and stuff. We could pick up product over here and then distribute in these other, through our distribution network, which is, for a small distributor, is fairly robust. And I think I had started thinking that a couple of years ago, but then I had a discussion as I was working with Trevor from DeGard on something, and he kind of mentioned that. I was like, we don't have an Oregon distributor. And I thought, well, shit, maybe I really will seriously look into this, because it wouldn't be like I can start it and then try to find, it's like I have a friend with a product that is extremely well made, high quality, someone I really respect, him and Lindsay, and maybe that does make sense, because if we look into this and we put it together, we're already going to the places that their beer would end up. We're already going to DeGard because they sell our beer. And so that kind of was the catalyst, I think, a year ago to really do it. And again, I have no idea how small or big this distribution company is going to be, because that's just kind of how we do it. We know we're doing well now. We bring someone on, we work it out, make sure it's going well, and then we bring some in. Of course, at some point I have to look at my facilities and go, okay, now depending on what products we have and what we need, where do we need more facilities or whatnot. And when you start making those types of decisions, then we might start being like, okay, now we need a portfolio like this or that.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I've seen some other distributors' facilities, and I know, ours is really, we have nice facilities for a certain amount of product to move.
Mm-hmm. Well, some people might think that there would be a conflict of interest, with you having your own beer and then representing another brand like DeGard. I mean, what would you say to that?
Well, and I think that's really important. We would, when I look at suppliers, so those would be the people we work with, and I look at a portfolio, you want something that works in unison together. So with the case of DeGard, and the amount of volume they need, want us to move, and their product goes really well with what we're doing. So if I were to bring on another brewery, or whoever, we'd always want to look at, here's what we're doing. How does that kind of fit in with what we're doing, and make sure that if they're competing, it doesn't matter because the volumes make sense, or that they really are not competing with each other. And more importantly, so that you can really tell that story for everyone. If it gets too noisy, you're not able to tell the story, and that's so important for DeGard or Bespoke and Coffee Roasters, who's our local roasters we've known for a while that we're distributing their product. So we can tell their story about their products and who they are. So that would be our end goal, is to have how much, supply amounts, demand amounts, and a portfolio that comes together that really works in unison.
Speaking of Bespoke and Coffee, I mean, isn't that a little bit different to be selling a coffee, rather than beer? I mean, are you going to go into different places trying to move that, or similar like grocery stores that you might be selling the beer into anyway?
Right. That was the idea. Is we sell to specialty grocery stores, tap houses, bottle shops, restaurants, places like that. So when we look at a product or something that we think would be great to add to the mix, it would need to fit in those places. So is coffee different than beer? Well, yeah, I mean it is, but it's in the way Bespoken does it, a very artistic craft beverage. And as a distributor, if we were to say, we're just going to work with all breweries, well, then kind of what you were talking about earlier, then you just have a book that's kind of all butting heads. I think that I have no idea exactly what it'll look like a year from now or 3 years from now, but I envision potentially 6 to 10 or 12 small artisans that all work together, and that can, coffee, obviously beer. Do we have, does another brewery or two work in the mix of what we're doing? Probably. Cider for sure. Kombucha, sure, why not? People like me and a lot of people I know that drink craft beer are also drinking really good coffee. They're drinking kombucha. Maybe they're really into, a nice cheese or something. Maybe that makes sense. I don't know. Or bar snacks, shit. Something that, we're not looking to really open up more territory or really get more accounts past kind of like when you bring someone on, maybe there's places that are interested in them. So we kind of organically start going to those places as well. But there's no restraints. It's great again because we started our self-distribution. We're doing a great job in our network and making that work, kind of slowly adding on suppliers to kind of all work together. It's kind of the route we're going to go, and we want to make sure we can give them the time and logistics and our retailers. So right now is a really crazy time. And again, we were working on this a year ago. So everything with the environment now, we're not anticipating. So we're kind of working in with that also. When maybe brands are now relying more on distribution, on getting their beers out or products out to other places because their coffee shops are half closed or their tap rooms are closed or whatever else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, speaking of that, with the current ongoing shutdown of dine-in services, I mean, how is that? We know how it's affecting businesses, but how is it affecting your plans for the future? I mean, are you counting on or expecting things to go back to relative normal, or could this be a whole paradigm shift in the way dine-in brew pubs work?
That's a really good question. I mean, one that literally we are troubleshooting and adjusting to every day. The way I'm trying to look at things is I do think shit will get back to normal, whatever normal is, and when that occurs. Human beings, if there's one thing I've learned, even the people that generally don't like to be around other people, now 6 weeks in this quarantine want to be around other people. We're just we're animals like that. We want to be around other people. When it gets back to when we can trust being around other people is a whole other question. But the way I look at running my business now is that here's the environment we're in. And hopefully it's going to get better. I think it will get better, but it could be a long ass time. Even when this shit first hit, people were like, oh, it's going to be, 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. I was like, this shit's not going to happen. This is going to be going on for a long time. So, every day I'm adjusting, I'm scrambling, I'm looking at it. And the whole, for me, in what I'm doing is how the hell do we break even? And how do we get there? That's all I'm hoping for right now, is to not continue to lose money and get to that. So I look at the atmosphere, I saw a preview of what, might be coming for us, and, being able to open up this and that. And so, we'll adjust to it. We'll make, all businesses generally evolve and adjust. And this is just going to take probably a lot quicker evolution and adjusting, to try to stay up with things. So, fortunately, my business is fairly diverse. We have a lot of different things going on. And so, obviously my restaurants and tap rooms have crashed and there's nothing, but I've got distribution going out. We have drive-through beer sales we're doing every Saturday. All these things are helping bring in revenue to kind of support, the kind of rest of the businesses. Things hopefully will start slowly opening up, and hopefully people will start feeling comfortable coming out. But we won't do anything if I don't feel comfortable. If I don't feel comfortable going out in my own business, we wouldn't open it. So that's always the question. Also, they could say, hey, do whatever the hell you want, open back up. Would I want to do that? And then, that's really important. If I will take my family out in whatever environment they allow, then we will do that as a company. If I won't, we won't do that.
Thanks for your time, man. I hope everything continues going well in Corvallis.
We're rolling trucks around.
Yes. All right. Thanks, Nick.
All right. Cheers. Thanks, Ezra.